Every day when I finished eating suhoor, my father would say, "Today your fast will be broken." Hearing this, I would tremble. One day, my soul trembled when, shortly before the fast, a white discharge came out of my body. It had only been a few days since Ramadan started. Today was my third fast, and I had been feeling a strange change in my being for the past few days. Now, whoever saw me would be surprised, and I myself would be shocked when I saw myself in the mirror. My mother was also worried when she saw me. Suddenly, I didn't know why I started looking so much older than my age. Now, my father and grandmother would sit up and talk to my mother about getting me married. My grandmother said that the girl has become young, and it is not considered good to keep girls who become young before their time at home. You should look for a relationship for her. Rather, I say that she has taken good care of her Sajida. Your Nand is a son who has grown up right before your eyes. What is wrong with him? He only gets a little drunk. This is not such a big flaw. Everything will be fine after marriage. Hearing Grandma's words, I and my mother were left trembling with fear. She was a drunkard, and the whole neighborhood knew about her exploits. I used to shiver with fear when I saw her. Now, since Ramadan had begun, every evening, whenever my father found me alone, he would tell me meaningfully that your fast will be broken today. I would double over with shame at his words. I felt very strange hearing such words from him. That's when I would bow my head in shame. This was my father's habit every second or third day, and I had now started hiding from him. I also felt the changes in my being. Whenever I felt ashamed to go in front of anyone, everyone's eyes would widen upon seeing me. All this seemed very strange to me. My mother was very worried about me. She didn't even look at me with her eyes open. I don't know what she was afraid of. Now she would wake up at night more than usual to look at me. And because of her looking at me like this, I started to feel unsafe in my own house. I started to feel as if there were many beasts sitting in my niche who would tear me apart and eat me. When my mother was so worried about me, my father also looked at me with strange eyes. That day, when I returned home from school, my father told me and my mother to make some arrangements for iftar in the evening. My sister and Rafiq brother are coming home today. After hearing them, I remained silent. Rafiq and his father's eyes seemed very strange to me. They stared at me from head to toe in a strange and consuming manner. At that time, my mother did not know what she was worried about. She was lost in her own thoughts. In such a situation, my mother could not help but hide me in a dark room with 7 curtains and lock the door from the outside so that no one could even come near me. Even today, when I was going to the room to perform ablution and pray, my father laughed and said to me in a meaningful way, "I think your fast will definitely break today." Hearing this from my father for the second time, my mouth dropped open. What kind of father was he who spoke to his young daughter in this way? I was very angry with my father's behavior. When I complained to my mother, she would sigh coldly and say, "I am a lonely, weak woman. How can I hide you from everyone? I don't understand how to keep you safe from everyone. I have one brother. How many times have I written to him and informed him about my situation? He has not come to check on me yet. I don't know if he doesn't get my letter or if he doesn't care about his sister and niece. May Allah put mercy in his heart for me." My mother was as if she were drowning, and I silently said amen to her prayers. I also wanted my uncle to come here as soon as possible and take me and my mother from here. Apparently, we didn't have any problems here, but the way Amma was always worried and the way she was always worried about me made me feel like I was about to face some great danger. My confidence was completely gone. In the evening, when Uncle and her husband came, I was in the kitchen getting Amma ready. At that moment, Father called Amma into the room and closed the door. I didn't know what they had talked about, but I had an idea that maybe they were going to put pressure on Amma today for my relationship with Rafiq. That's why I was so scared. As soon as I thought of Rafiq's appearance, I was left with a shiver. At that moment, I felt someone behind me. When I turned around, Rafiq was standing there. He was smiling at me in a strange way. His laughter scared me. He said, "Why are you so scared? I am your future husband. After all, I have a right over you. I will not eat you." When he spoke while showing his yellow teeth, I could not help but throw him somewhere where no one could see him. He also looked at me with strange, lustful eyes. He said, "You have become even bigger than before. In fact, you have become a full-bodied young girl." His eyes were fixed on my appearance, and I was feeling naked even in this big dupatta. At that moment, Grandma came to the kitchen and sent Rafiq to get curd from the market. I thanked God for averting this trouble. And then, even while breaking the fast, Rafiq and his father's eyes were constantly on me. Her father was also repeating the same sentence over and over again, that your daughter is starting to look very young. Now she is ready to get married. Now my sister-in-law will not object to the fact that my daughter is small, but she is a beautiful young girl. Along with her words, lust was seen dancing in her eyes. I was now starting to hate the word young. Whoever saw me would say the same thing. I used to want to hide myself in a place where no one would look at me. Whenever anyone would say such a sentence to me, my eyes would go to my mother and she would look at me helplessly. I could not understand what was my fault. I then left the food and went to my room. Those people. Whenever they came home, I would hide from them. My mother was completely silent and absent-minded. I don't know what was bothering her. She was repeatedly writing letters to my uncle, and my uncle was the one who wasn't even answering the letters. That day, shortly before the fast, my father laughed and told me that whether it was today or not, your fast is going to break today. Hearing my father's words, I started to feel disgusted by him. As soon as I went into the room, suddenly, my body. I was 10 years old when my father passed away. This shock was very big. At the age of 10, I became an orphan. I had to leave my home, my school, my friends, and everything. I came to my uncle's house with my mother. My uncle was living in Dubai, and he had come here for a few months' vacation. His family lived in Dubai. Now, when my mother became a widow and came here, my uncle was worried about how he would leave my mother alone. Even so, my mother was young and very beautiful to look at. In such a situation, my uncle used to worry about my mother. Whenever my uncle tried to get my mother married, my mother protested that she was not in favor of getting married again. Her daughter was growing up and she could spend the rest of her life with the support of her daughter. But my uncle said that you will have to get married again. Even so, you are still so old. You cannot live such a long life without the support of a man. I live in Dubai with my family, and I cannot take care of you by staying here. Nor can the papers, etc., be prepared so quickly. That's why I want someone to be your support, so that I can also be worry-free from you. Then my uncle found out from here and there and got my mother married as soon as her period of waiting was over. Things were fine for 2 years, and after 2 years, my stepfather's views on me started changing. At that time, I was only 14 years old, and my father started talking to my mother about getting me married. That too, Rafiq was my stepfather's nephew. He was also 32, 33 years old. He was much older than me, and whenever he talked to my mother about my relationship, my mother would tell him, "Fear God, my daughter is still very young, and how can I marry her off?" And my father, looking at me with meaningful eyes, would say, "How long does it take for girls to grow up? If not today, then tomorrow, she will start looking like a full-grown young girl." Suddenly, my mother's sleep had been shattered. She could not sleep because of anxiety. That night, too, my eyes were opened by the sound of a knock. I sat up in a panic. My sleep had been very rough since childhood, and I would wake up at the slightest sound. Today, too, the same thing happened. I sat up in a panic after hearing that sound. When I looked, I saw a shadow standing in the doorway. I did not know whose shadow it was. I started screaming loudly. Hearing my voice, my mother slept in the next room. My mother immediately came there. And she started asking me what was the matter. Why were you making noise? For the past few years, my mother had been worried about me in the same way. She would calm down after just a few words. If I had the slightest pain or any injury, she would immediately take me to the doctor. And now she would get worried over the slightest thing. Now I wondered why she had started taking such care of me, not knowing what had happened to Amma. Sometimes I would get annoyed at this, although I should have been happy that my mother loved me so much. But despite this, I would sometimes get tired of taking such care. At night, while I was sleeping, she would come and see me again and again, and as many times as she came to this room, my eyes would open as many times, and then seeing me awake, she would leave the room apologizing, and I would fall asleep again, and as soon as I would get lost in the valleys of sleep again, she would do the same thing again. I would say to Amma, "Amma, you were not like this before. But now, what has happened to you that you have started worrying about me so much?" Amma would say, with tears in her eyes, that it was different before. It is different now. I am worried about you. I am worried about you. You don't know that I have lost sleep at night. I could also see that Amma had trouble sleeping at night, but I was unable to understand the reason for this. When I asked Amma about it, she would say that times had changed, circumstances had changed, and now Amma's health had been very bad for the past few days, and she was starting to be more worried than before. Every second or third day, I would wake up to the sound of some knock or the other, and when I looked around, there was no one around me. That day, I was sleeping when I felt a needle prick in my arm. I woke up immediately and saw that my father was standing in front of me. When he found me awake, he had a strange smile on his face. He told me that your mother was worried about you. That is why I came to see you. He had said something strange in a strange way, which made me worried. Even so, I felt very afraid of my stepfather. I did not know what was in his eyes that when I looked into his eyes, I was trembling with fear. Now, this started happening every second or third day. Mother's health was getting worse day by day, and father was not even taking her to the doctor. When I asked mother to take care of herself, to see a doctor, then only will you be fine if you do the same. If you stay at home, you will only get sicker and you will never get better. She would sigh coldly and say, "Shahid, this pain will take my life. I am waiting for your uncle to come and send you with him." Hearing what my mother said, I would become depressed and pray in my heart that my mother's trust would never be broken. My uncle was a rich man and he was happy with his family. How could they think of their poor widowed sister? Now, every second or third day, while sleeping at night, I would feel a strange tingling sensation in my arm. When I opened my eyes, my stepfather would stand next to me. Then, seeing me open my eyes, he would leave. Now, I was very worried. Now, I locked the door of the room from the inside and started sleeping. After a few days, I surprisingly started looking much older than my age. Even when I went to school, boys would look at me with strange eyes and shout at me. I was terrified by all these things. My confidence had completely disappeared. Now, the eyes of my stepfather from above would force me to live in despair. Now, since Ramadan had started, he would say the same thing to me every second or third day, and I would be left trembling with shame. That day, when I came into the room, I felt my life leaving my body. A strange liquid started coming out of me. Seeing this, I got scared and immediately called my mother. My mother was also scared to see this. At that moment, darkness had fallen in front of my eyes and I fainted. When I opened my eyes, I was in the hospital. My mother and stepfather were with me. My mother's face showed concern and worry for me. Seeing me open her eyes, she came to me and hugged me tightly and burst into tears. My mother's crying was beyond my understanding. Only then, when I remembered what had happened before I fainted, I also became worried and started wondering why such moisture had come out of my body. This had never happened before today. I felt like my life was leaving my body. My heart was beating more than usual. After a long time, my health had returned to normal. My mother had brought me home, and now my mother had started taking care of me more than before. She used to sleep with me at night and would wake up every night and check on me again and again to make sure that I was okay. My mother's worry was beyond my understanding. In such a situation, my stepfather and my grandmother also. They kept whispering to each other, not knowing what to say. My mother was very worried about all this, and now she was getting more and more anxious about writing letters. And that day, a strange thing happened. All my mother's prayers came true. That day, my mother's brother, my maternal uncle, came home. When my mother saw him, she hugged him and burst into tears. There was so much sadness and grief that she shed in the form of tears as soon as she met her brother's embrace. And then she went to her room with her brother. For how long did they both keep talking to each other? I didn't know what happened between them. When my uncle started to leave, he told me to pack your clothes. You are going with me. My uncle's eyes were turning red and he was trying to hide the expression on his face. When I saw my mother, she started telling me that, yes, from today you will stay with your uncle, but how can I leave you alone? Now my stepfather also came in between and said that this is his house and this is my daughter. She will not leave the house and go anywhere. My uncle gave him a cold look and said that I am her uncle, and this is her mother's decision, and I respect my sister's decision. Then, after my mother's persuasion, I came to her house with my uncle. My uncle had now shifted to Pakistan. When I came to her house, I was thinking, I don't know. How would my aunt treat me? How would her children treat me? But nothing like that happened. My aunt's 2 children were much younger than me. They both met me with great affection, and my aunt was very nice. She also met me in a very nice way. When my aunt told her that I would always stay here, she was very happy to hear this, and said that I used to get bored alone anyway. It's good that you have brought my daughter. When I came to my aunt's house, I started liking life now. The fear and dread that was always on my mind had now left me. My aunt often came to meet me, and whenever she went, she would take me to her and say that I never wanted to be separated from you. But now I was forced to, and I didn't even know why my aunt did this. And one day when my aunt came to me, she was very sad and started telling me that I miss you a lot. I am not used to living without you now. Gradually, this habit will become a habit. Then I asked my mother, why did you leave me here? And why don't you come here yourself now? Amma took a deep breath and said, you know that your uncle and Rafiq had a bad eye on you. Rafiq wanted to marry you, but his father wanted to take advantage of you. These people had paid a huge amount of money to your stepfather to arrange your relationship, which he had hidden from me. He was giving you injections that made you look older than your age. My mouth dropped open after hearing Amma's words. I was shocked. How could these people stoop to such a level? They were using an orphan girl as their property. They did not have to appear before Allah on the day of judgment. They had no fear of God. I could never have imagined that my stepfather could do such a thing. Tears came out of my eyes without control. I was crying over my and my mother's helplessness. I didn't know what kind of injections had damaged my health. My health could have been affected even further. Then my mother said that whenever he talked about your relationship, I used to tell him that you were still young. That's why he had started giving you those injections and you started looking older than your age. I first suspected it when I saw him giving you injections once. This suspicion turned into certainty when your health deteriorated that day. Then the doctor confirmed that you were being given some medicines, as a reaction to which your hormones had been disturbed. Now I understood why that strange fluid had come out of my body. It meant that whatever had happened, my stepfather just wanted to use me for his own benefit. My mother said, even then, I picked you up from there and brought you here. But mother, you come here yourself. After all, how long will you live there suffocating? I know that you are not happy there and father does not care about you either. She smiled with moist eyes and then said, this cannot happen. I cannot give people a chance to make things up. You do not know. This world will kill me alive. And anyway, He is my husband. If Allah wills, he will be fine. After that, Mother went back. But that burden was lifted from my heart, and I was forced to think about how constrained a woman is, how she cannot make any decision of her own free will. That's when I decided that I would become a capable person by studying and writing, so that I wouldn't have to look at anyone else's face while making life decisions, and I could live my life according to my own wishes. Because it is very important for a girl to be capable so that she can bear her own expenses and not be dependent on anyone. My advice to all of you is to teach your children some skill or the other.